welcome to the Room of Requirement. Today I'm going to be talking about a subject. We did not come here to learn. So over the years I've figured out that this isn't the full reason why we are here. It's talked about in New Age circles, and even I believed it for a really long time, that you come here to the Earth School to learn. But as time went on and I grew and got deeper into my path, I figured out that wasn't fully true. So let's go ahead and dive in. We came here to unlearn. What if one of the biggest misunderstandings about spirituality is the idea that you came here primarily to learn? From the moment we enter this world, we are conditioned to believe that we are incomplete, disconnected, separate from the divine, and that through struggle, lifetimes, and endless experience, we slowly become worthy of returning to something greater than ourselves. But what if that is not what is actually happening? What if incarnation is not fundamentally a school, but an immersion into limitation, conditioning, and forgetfulness? And the spiritual path is not the accumulation of knowledge, but the unraveling of everything that made you forget what you already are. Because the deeper you move into the esoteric traditions, the mystical teachings, and learn about near-death experiences and initiatory paths, the more a shocking realization begins to emerge that you were never actually separate from the divine to begin with. The separation feels real. The conditioning feels real. The suffering feels real. But beneath all of it, something ancient within you has remained connected the entire time. And awakening begins the moment you stop trying to become something new and start remembering what has always been there beneath the illusion. We are vast, infinite beings who have already learned it all through many incarnations. We just forgot through the veil, and we ourselves are the veil. It's not some magic curtain, and this is the highest form of the version of ourselves we need to remember. Incarnation itself is an immersion into illusions, and the spiritual path is the reversal of identification with this illusion. Not learning, unlearning. The Earth School narrative itself may actually reinforce identification with limitation. So what I'm saying is, we do not incarnate because we are deficient. We do not incarnate because we are less evolved. And we are not separated beings trying to earn divinity. We enter limitation and conditioning. Then awakening becomes the process of seeing through it. And that is much deeper. One of the most common beliefs repeated throughout modern spirituality is the idea that Earth is a school, that we incarnate here to learn lessons and evolve spiritually and grow through experience over countless lifetimes. And while this perspective may contain partial truth, there is a much deeper esoteric understanding found within many mystical traditions that radically changes how the spiritual path is understood. What if we are not here primarily to learn, but to unlearn? What if incarnation itself is immersion into limitation, conditioning, and identification, and awakening is the gradual dissolution of everything that made us forget what we already are beneath the illusion? Because at a certain depth on the path, spirituality stops feeling like accumulation and begins feeling like removal. From the moment we enter this world, consciousness becomes immersed in conditioning, family systems, religion, education, trauma, culture, fear, social structures, survival mechanisms, identity formation, political systems, collective beliefs, media, comparison, achievement, materialism. All of it gradually constructs a version of reality that becomes normalized so completely that most people never question it. Over time, the conditioned self becomes mistaken for the true self. Thought becomes mistaken for consciousness, and identity becomes mistaken for essence. Conditioning becomes mistaken for reality. This is not merely education, it is immersion. One of the deepest teachings within esoteric philosophy is that humanity exists in a profound state of identification with illusion. Not illusion in the sense that the world does not exist, but illusion in the sense that we mistake temporary structures for ultimate reality. We become identified with the body, the personality, social identity, fear structures, memory, trauma, achievement, attachment, and external validation until consciousness becomes almost completely absorbed in limitation. This is the great forgetting. Not because the divine connection disappears, but because awareness becomes hypnotized by form. This is the critical point that many spiritual systems fail to communicate clearly enough. The soul was never truly disconnected from the divine to begin with. The experience of separation is real psychologically, emotionally, and existentially within human life, but many mystical traditions suggest it is not ultimate reality. The wave appears separate from the ocean, but the wave was never separate from the ocean. The human being experiences individuality, but individuality exists within consciousness itself, not outside of it. And this change is the entire meaning of awakening, because awakening is no longer becoming divine. It becomes remembering that the divine essence was never absent. This raises the obvious question: if we were never actually disconnected, why incarnate at all? Why enter limitation, suffering, confusion, conditioning, and forgetfulness? Because consciousness cannot experience reunion consciously without first experiencing contrast. Without forgetfulness, there is no remembering. Without limitation, there is no transcendence. Without identification, there is no awakening from identification. This is why incarnation appears paradoxical. Consciousness enters immersion within form, individuality, and separation, not because it is fallen in an absolute sense, but because contrast creates the possibility for realization from within the experience itself. The reason this distinction matters is because many spiritual teachings unintentionally reinforce identification with the limitation. They frame the soul as deficient, incomplete, or spiritually immature, as though consciousness itself must endlessly accumulate lessons in order to become worthy, evolved, or whole. But many deeper esoteric traditions suggest the opposite. The essence itself is already whole. We are already whole. We never weren't. We are already connected, already carrying the imprint of Source. What is incomplete is not the essence. It is the identification with illusion. And this changes the orientation of the entire spiritual path. The path stops becoming, how do I become more spiritually evolved? And it becomes, what must dissolve for truth to become visible again? Conditioning is not merely social programming. It becomes metaphysical identification. Human beings become so immersed in thought, emotion, fear, and memory, trauma, identity, desire, comparison, and external pursuit that they completely forget their deeper nature. The modern world intensifies this dramatically. Constant stimulation, distraction, material obsession, social identity, performance culture, ideological division, and endless noise keep consciousness externally fixated most continuously. Very few people ever become still enough to perceive what exists beneath the conditioned mind, and this is why so many people feel existentially empty despite external success. Because the soul is not searching for more conditioning, it is searching for remembrance. At a certain point on the path, something begins to shift. Truth no longer feels entirely external. Spiritual realization no longer feels like information being added. Instead, there is often a profound sense of familiarity, as though something ancient within you already knows. This appears constantly across mystical experience, deep meditation, initiatory states, and near-death experiences. People describe remembering, returning, awakening, coming home, recognizing, and reconnecting, not because new truth was created, but because illusion temporarily weakened enough for deeper reality to become visible again. This is one of the most difficult esoteric ideas to communicate properly. The deepest truth is not imported into consciousness from the outside. It already exists within consciousness itself. The spiritual path does not create the divine essence. It removes the distortions obscuring awareness of it. This is why the deepest traditions emphasize silence, contemplation, gnosis, inner transformation, direct realization, and self-knowledge rather than mere belief accumulation. Because awakening is not fundamentally informational, it is revelatory. This is also why suffering becomes such a powerful catalyst. Suffering destabilizes the structures through which the conditioning maintains itself. Loss, grief, existential crisis, trauma, emptiness, disillusionment, and the collapse interrupts unconscious identification long enough for deeper questions to emerge. Who am I beneath all of this? What remains when identity structures fail? Why does nothing external fully resolve the longing? Suffering cracks the illusion enough for remembrance to begin, not because suffering itself is the goal, but because it weakens complete immersion within conditioning. From this perspective, awakening is not becoming something greater than you are. It is seeing through what you are not, the false identity, the conditioning, the inherited structures, the illusion of separation, the compulsion identification with limitation. And as these structures begin dissolving, what remains begins feeling strangely familiar, because it was never absent, only obscured. At the deepest levels of the path, spirituality stops feeling like self-improvement entirely. It begins feeling like remembrance, a gradual unveiling of what existed before the conditioning, before the fear, and before the immersion into limitation. And this realization changes everything, because the seeker eventually discovers that what was being sought was never truly separate from the seeker at all. If you have ever felt that ordinary reality could not fully explain the depth of your longing, if you have ever sensed something ancient beneath your identity, if moments of stillness, silence, or spiritual insight have felt more familiar than foreign, then you may have already been touching the edges of remembrance itself. The spiritual path is not fundamentally about learning how to become divine. It is about unlearning everything that made you believe you were ever separate from the divine to begin with. At a certain point, the path begins to reveal itself not as a process of becoming something new, but as the gradual dissolution of everything that obscured what was always present beneath the conditioning of human life, and this realization transforms the meaning of spirituality completely. The deepest awakening is not the accumulation of endless lessons, identities, or spiritual concepts, but the recognition that beneath the immersion into limitation, fear, separation, and form, the connection to the divine was never actually broken. And as the structures of conditioning slowly loosen, what once felt distant begins to feel profoundly familiar, as though something ancient within consciousness itself is finally remembering what it has always been beneath the illusion. Okay, you guys, I know this is kind of like a hard subject to kind of wrap your mind around, because we're so conditioned in the spiritual community that we're here to learn, and we are to a certain extent. But we are vast, infinite beings that possess divine sparks, and we have had hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing here for us to learn. We already know. The point is, we are here to feel. We are here to experience, and we're here to remember. Okay, you guys, hope you enjoyed this one. So I've got some subjects that I'm going to be doing coming up after this one that I'm really excited about. I'm going to take a deep dive into Kabbalah, the Tree of Life, the Zohar, and the Sefer Yetzirah. I'm also going to be taking a deep dive into some, I'm going to do into some manuscripts, codexes. So I'm going to be doing the Arbitel, the Picatrix. I'm going to be talking about egregores as well, Enochian magic, and I'm also going to be, let's see, I think that's it so far. But I'm really excited to bring all of these subjects. I've been working really hard trying to get all these videos ready for you guys. So I appreciate you, and we will see you next time. Bye.